very kind. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, welcome to Enough Rope. For the last 30 years, my first guest has had the hardest working vocal cords in Australian music. I saw him back in '78, my ears are still ringing. Off stage, he's lived a life every bit as loud as his singing. He's partied hard, played hard, loved hard, fallen hard and lived to laugh about it all. Please welcome a man who's crawled off his sick bed to be with us tonight. He's got a little bit of flu, Mr. Jimmy Barnes. Good to see you. Now, this is...
keep the distance.
Yes, I will. I'm particularly honoured you came in tonight because you've just cancelled 4 gigs, which is unusual.
It's very, very rare. I think there's probably about a half a dozen I've cancelled in the last, 15 or 20 years.
Are you healthy enough to go back to your early days? Can you...
I can remember them, yeah. Well, what I can remember of them anyway, yeah.
Because when you emigrated from Scotland to come to Adelaide, you were only 6. You were one of the £10 Poms.
£10 tourists, that's right.
Yeah, and you guys were basically really poor. What were those days like living in Elizabeth?
Well, Elizabeth was actually pretty good. When we first arrived, we moved to a place called Jepp's Cross, which was the, the old Nissan huts, the round huts. And we arrived in, we're thinking, first off, the ad said, come to sunny South Australia, we're emigrating. And we got here and it rained for like 6 weeks and it was, it was miserable. And, my mum and dad, I think for about the first 5 years, just wanted to get on a boat and get back to Scotland. But, we were pretty happy, coming out of Glasgow where, if you've seen a cat with a tail, it was a tourist. Suddenly you've got fields and there's animals and there's dogs and there's, places to play football and all that, so we were pretty happy, but...
did you think of yourselves as poor, or did you realise you were struggling?
Never really thought about it that much, It was, we were what we were, we were like everybody else who was there. They were all the same, all battlers,
Because your dad was, he was a boxing champion in Scotland and England. Your older brother, Johnny, was pretty handy with his fists too.
Yeah.
Were you a tough bunch?
Yeah, they were tough. I sort of bluffed my way through it. No, it was a fairly sort of tough. My mum was the best sparring partner in town. Put it that way.
Is that right?
Yeah. She, they had a tough life. My dad, my dad was featherweight champion of Britain, and sort of when he finished, he was an amateur boxer. He didn't want to go professional because it was too sort of corrupt, and he wouldn't take dives and stuff. So when his career finished, it was sort of a big letdown for him, So he was sort of this big sort of star in Scotland, and after he finished boxing, it was sort of we had to leave, we had to start a new life. Yeah.
Your dad took to drinking, didn't he? What impact did that have on the family?
Well, it was an ongoing thing, I think my dad always drank, really. He just trained hard when he was a boxer. It was coming from Glasgow, it was that working class, Glasgow thing that alcohol was pretty sort of prominent in the lifestyle, and obviously affected lots of families. There was lots of violence, lots of my mum and dad divorced pretty early in the piece. It was pretty horrific sort of when you look back at it, it was a pretty horrific childhood. At the time, we thought it was okay, We survived, But it sort of certainly had a lot of impact on all of us, the ongoing effects are, still being felt now.
In what way?
For 35 years or something, I was sort of seriously out of control, drinking. My brother was an alcoholic. My sisters have had problems. It affected the whole family, and it affected everybody that was around us and connected with us,
It's amazing how it echoes through, isn't it?
Oh, it's a genetic thing, it goes back, from our grandparents and, their parents, and, it was just the done thing, I remember getting, New Year's Eve, the age of 5 years old, getting whiskey given to me, at midnight, because, everybody has to drink whiskey at midnight. It's a Scots thing, They're all drunk and giving it to you. Here, have this, son,
Wow.
And eventually, we started sneaking up to all the parties, so they're grabbing the drinks and they weren't looking, So, it was sort of part of the society, It wasn't sort of particularly my parents. It was all the families that we knew that sort of came through that,
When you were 14, your mum married Reg Barnes, which is where you got the name Barnes from.
Yeah.
And he basically took over the whole brood in many ways, didn't he? What kind of a man was Reg?
He was a bit of a saint, He was great, I think at one stage he was going to become a priest. And then he met my mum. My mum was actually sharing a house with his cousins, and they worked in a psychiatric ward together, which sort of set them up well for looking after us. And my mum was at dinner one night, and he was there, and she was saying how she had to, because my dad had fallen apart since my mum left, and we were all with my dad, and it was, we was pretty dire stuff, you know. I think the people were going to take us off our parents and put us into homes and stuff. And my mum had been given a sort of an ultimatum that she had to be sort of settled and have a home before she could get us. And so she had like 6 months to get this house together and be buying a house and be settled. And so she had to find a fella. And Reg Barnes just put his hand up and said, oh, you know, I'll marry you. You know, and he hardly knew her. He said, I'll marry you. I don't want the kids to be going into homes, you know.
Wow.
So one minute this guy's going to be a priest and he's a teetotaler, and next minute he's got 6 juvenile delinquents, you know, moving in all in rock bands, you know, moving into his house, you know. It was like, he was a great bloke.
When you were 17, you joined Cold Chisel. Was that the big ticket out from where you were?
Well, it was sort of a ticket out of Elizabeth more than anything. And Elizabeth is a satellite city outside of Adelaide where they just stick all the immigrants. And it was, like I said, it was a great place when you were young, getting there, football fields everywhere. But actually, as soon as you get to sort of around 13 or 14, it gets pretty rugged, you know. There's like lots of gangs, lots of street fights. Like a lot of working class places, they hadn't got a lot for kids to do, so we really could get ourselves in a lot of trouble. And I was starting to get myself in a lot of trouble. And I joined Cold Chisel and really got myself in a lot of trouble. And it was official. So.
Yeah, professional trouble. That was a good thing.
Yeah.
But we're going to show, this is obviously a very famous clip. This is probably at the height of Chisel. This is Jimmy in the days of East.
I don't mind taking charity from those that I despise. Baby, I don't need your love. I don't need your love.
That young man.
Who's that good-looking fella? I've got to tell you a funny story. With the East, the whole thing, we recorded East, and then I went to Japan to visit Jane and her mum. And I went to Japan, and while I was there, they were having these riots in Japan. These called the Spring Offensive. The university students used to riot about stuff, I don't know what, in Japan. But they all wore these headbands with sort of fight for freedom and death before dishonor written on them in Japanese, and I thought, this is really great, you know. So I grabbed a bunch of them and I brought them back. And I got back and we're doing the cover for East. And so, you know, I told the production team about it. They said, great idea, you wear that in the bath, you know, with all the gear, all the paraphernalia. About 3 years later, this Japanese guy comes up to me and says, you got your headband on upside down. So that was pretty sort of, you know, it's embarrassing, you know. Yeah.
Now, with Chisel, of course, you were the front man of what was one of the biggest acts in the country.
Yeah.
Does being in that position do strange things to your ego?
Yeah, it can do, yeah. You know, I'm sure there was times I got, you know, carried away with it. But, you know, I mean, that band was particularly good at, you know, keeping our feet in the ground, you know. I mean, the band would jump on you first and foremost. If I got too uppity, you know. The other thing was, you know, midway through Cold Chisel, I started a family. And there's nothing like, you know, having a family to keep your feet in the ground, you know. I mean, you can be a big rock star and all that sort of stuff, you know, have screaming fans, but you go home and you got to change your shitty nappies, you know. It's pretty grounding, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Did you ever think of wearing a shitty nappy?
At least it would be on the right way. Yeah. Could have been a whole new look.
What a horrible thought. Yes.
Shithead.
You were 23 when you met Jane.
Yeah.
Was it an instant thing for you?
It was for me. I remember the minute I seen her, and I was in Canberra, and went to a hotel. We were doing a show in the afternoon, in the evening, called Pooled Resources, which was a tour with Ice House and the Angels and, you know, Mentals. It was a great thing. And we were in Canberra, and we were staying at this hotel. And in the afternoon, everybody was around, all friends were around at the hotel. Everybody's sort of having something to eat, and the Angels were, you know, out there throwing frisbees around. And Jane knew some of the Angels. Her and her friends knew some of the Angels, and they were there. And I walked.
You've just made it sound like a garden party, all having something to eat and frisbees. Come on.
Well, that's it. I mean, doobies.
Oh, right, yes.
No, it was pretty.
Yes.
You know, the Angels are nice boys, you know?
Yes.
And they were pretty laid back, and it was, you know, it was. It was a garden party till I got there.
Yeah.
And then I walked in, and Jane was sitting across the room, and I just remember seeing her. I thought she was the most adorable woman I'd ever seen. She didn't say a word to me, and so I'm sort of like trying to catch her eye and stuff like this, and she wouldn't speak, and she didn't speak to anybody else. So I presumed, you know, of course, she doesn't speak English, you know. So I'm sort of like, you know, trying to, you know, make sort of conversation, and unsuccessfully. That night, I went on stage, and of course, she'll probably tell you another story in a minute. I went on stage and came off stage, and Jane came up and we started talking. And at that point, I realised that she spoke English better than me and speaks 5 languages, you know. You know, and I just thought she was amazing from the minute I seen her. And we sort of, I got invited back to a good friend of hers, Victoria, who's a close friend of ours. Got invited back to their family home afterwards for a party. And at that point, Steve, the drummer from Cold Chisel, had broken his wrist or something, and the drummer we had standing in was a guy called Trevor Young, who used to play in Lobby Lloyd's Coloured Balls, and they were like the skinhead band, you know. And Trevor was the biggest animal you've ever seen in your life, you know. So we got to this party, and he was just going berserk, you know. And I'm trying to impress Jane and be, you know, be polite, you know, cigars and, you know, cognac, you know. And it wasn't working at all, you know. So next minute, Jane says, "Oh, your cab's here." And I said, "I didn't order a cab, did I?" You know? She said, "Yes, I think you did," you know. So she basically threw us out.
A very subtle hint.
Yeah, a very subtle hint. But, you know, then, you know, we caught up the next day, and I sort of stalked her for a few months, and, you know, eventually she gave in and went out.
Yeah.
She gave in and went out with me.
Jane, he was the wild man of Australian rock. What was it like introducing him to the family?
Oh, it was quite difficult. No, we introduced him by mail, I think. I remember.
It was easier that way.
No, my parents were over in Japan at the time, and they were getting reports of this wild man, like from the newspapers, like headlines like Jimmy and 1,000 Girls, etc. And they were hearing that I had started dating, seeing this man. So they didn't quite know what to think.
Did you tame the savage beast, or is that what attracted you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look at him.
That's not a ringing endorsement of your husband.
What can she say?
What can I say?
Well, Jimmy, you've just described yourself as compulsive, addictive, obsessive.
Sounds like most of the people I grew up with, actually.
In what way are these things true for you?
You know, I don't do anything in half measures, you know. I mean, I've always been sort of, you know, compulsive, obsessive, you know. Now I'm just compulsively moderate, you know. So, you know, I just, you know, I really have. It's always been a problem. I've always, you know, I've never really cared about being famous. I've always just wanted to have a great time. And I just want to, you know, get out and have, and part of me having a great time is, if I have a great time, everybody's going to have a great time, you know? So it works well if you're an entertainer and you have that sort of, you know, personality trait. You know?
As you said, you had a family young, you had 4 kids, and you would tour with them. How did you balance sort of going out and trashing yourself, which you did pretty regularly, and being a dad?
Well, it was difficult, you know. I mean, for a long, long time, I'd sort of, you know, I'd sort of trash myself on tour, and then we'd take really great holidays. We'd go away, and I'd sort of be balanced and I'd healthy, and I'd, you know, and do all that. Or I'd go back, you know, I had a great place in Barrow, and I'd go away and do shows and come back to Barrow, and it was like this sanctuary where I'd be healthy and happy and all this sort of stuff. But unfortunately, with most addictions and most, you know, alcoholics, it's sort of those gaps tended to get smaller and smaller and smaller until it became just a big wash, and I was sort of trashed the whole time. And I think, and that sort of happened more in the last sort of like 5 years ago, and that was probably the hardest time for the family. Yeah. You know, I think earlier on, because, you know, there was so much love anyway for the kids, and so much, you know, Jane's such a great mother. It's an extended family, you know. Jane's family are very, very close and very warm. The kids were always so loved, really, you know, a lot. And it wasn't until later on, when they got older, they seen the damage I was doing to myself, where they started to freak out. And you know, and at that point, it was sort of, you know, it started to become pretty obvious to me, because, you know, I was sort of, you know, fairly well full on all the time, and it was, and I had to make a choice of change or die. And for me, I've got the constitution of a horse, and I just figured that, you know, if it did keep going, I would die, and it wouldn't be a very attractive thing, you know. So,
no. Was there actually a moment where you went right?
There was a lot of moments. There was a lot of moments. I used to go on tour, and I'd sort of, you know, party, drink, and do anything, you know, for 10 days in a row. You know, not sleep, not eat, and, you know, do shows, and I'd end up, you know, everybody else that was anywhere near me would be dead and hospitalised and, you know, carried away, and I'd be sort of standing there looking in the mirror going, okay, what's it going to take to wipe you out, you know? So, you know, there was a few times like that where I just thought, you know, this has got to change. And, you know, luckily, you know, I never, like I say, I never lost the support of, you know, my family. Jane's like, you know, been my angel since the day I seen her. And so she sort of supported me and saved my ass, basically.
Jan, you just rolled your eyes then. What did that mean?
Back me up here, come on.
Look, I think any family who's been through what we've been through, like just the problems of the disease of addiction and alcoholism, at the beginning, it's a progressive disease, so earlier in the stages, you don't realise, you don't even know. And, you know, I suppose we balanced each other then. But as the disease, you know, progresses, then that's when it became more noticeable and the impact was greater on the family. And, you know, I guess we're just in it together, so it's not about being an angel. It's, you know, if you love somebody and you find somebody who puts up with you, like he has to put up with me as well.
That's what you do.
So
it's like, that's what you do.
So tough, I tell you.
EJ,
I have to put up with both of you.
No, these are the ones that
I didn't
suffered.
choose.
EJ, it must be a hard thing to see your dad spinning out of control.
Yeah, it was hard, but he's great now. So.
Yeah. What are your memories of him during that time?
I remember both of them sneaking home at like all hours of the morning. And
Would you
we'd
be
all
waiting up
sitting
for
there
them?
like, where have you been?
What time do you call this to?
That's right.
He just started looking really pasty and green.
There's a great story where apparently I came out of the studio in LA and I was really, really bad. And Diesel, you know, brother-in-law and Jeppy, Jane's sister, were there with their kids, and I'd been in the studio just going ballistic, you know, and the guy said, "Oh, come and join us for dinner," and I got to dinner, and apparently I was just like this, you know, and I sort of stayed for about 5 minutes, and then said, "Oh, I've got to go back to the studio," and when I left, Mark's son turned around to the mum and said, "Uncle Jimmy looked like a gecko." Look at my eyes were darting around everywhere in my screen, you know. So, you know, there was.
And you were stuck to the wall.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
just...
my tongue, and I kept picking things up on the table with my tongue. No, but, you know, so there was, you know, it's easy to laugh at it now, but there was some, you know, some real big signs that things had to change, yeah.
I want to also talk about David, because before your 4 kids, you'd had David when you were 16.
Yeah.
Who you gave up for adoption to his maternal grandmother.
Yeah, that was,
At that time. Now, was that just because you felt you were too young, or because you really weren't confident that you could be
well, it was sort
a dad?
of, it was an unusual situation. Well, obviously, I was 16, and so was his mother. And the parents sort of got together. My mum immediately said, you know, because my mum used to adopt everybody, you know, all the friends of the family and all that. But my mum said, look, you know, we'll adopt them, look out and bring the child up, you know. And then her parents said, you know, oh, we don't think it's the right thing. You know, it's too close. You know, if he's going to be adopted, it should be adopted for everybody concerned, you know. And then somehow, we don't know what happened, but her parents ended up adopting him. So it was all changed completely. But it all worked out for the best. He's a great boy. The way it was going to be was that he wasn't to know, you know, that I was his father, and that's what everybody decided. And he didn't know that his mother was his mother. It was quite deceptive, you know.
For 14 years, you...
No, it was for, you know, he sort of... I used to stay and sort of, you know, visit him occasionally, you know, just whenever I could. And he knew there was some connection with me, because all of a sudden this guy kept turning up and taking him places. And he'd seen me on records, and he's going, why, you know? And they said, oh, he's a mate of yours, you know? And I go, oh, yeah, okay.
Was that hard for you? You knew
it was
his dad.
difficult, you know what? And once again, you know, the driving force between getting us together was Jane, because Jane obviously said, you know, like, how can, you know, you've got a family, how can you see your child there and not be near him? And I just sort of took for granted that they didn't want me around, and I stayed away. So the more I thought about that, the more I wanted to be close to him, and it was a very difficult period, because then we'd started, you know, going down and spending more time with him, and he knew there was something going on, and he was sort of like, it was very strange, and finally, you know, like they had, you know, at some point, you know, he found out, and this poor kid found out that, you know, this wild guy who was coming down visiting all the time, taking him on holidays, was his dad. Who he thought was his sister was his mother, you know. It was all very strange for him. So, you know, it must have been really, really tough on the poor kid.
How do you, because he was about 14 when he realised that you were his dad, how do you pick up the pieces as a dad? after that amount of time?
Well, you just, you know, the thing I've sort of tried to do is just, you know, offer myself, I'm there. But, you know, if he needs anything from me. You know, David's a lot like myself, you know, whereas he's very stubborn. He's a real lot like myself. Very stubborn, and really wants to do things on his own. He doesn't want a lot from me, which is, you know, he doesn't want my guidance as far as music. You know, he's never sort of listened to what I do musically. He's always come from a different place. You know,
does it irk him, therefore, that he's professionally inextricably linked with you?
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does, you know. I mean, you know, I think that's why he did, you know, he got into music, you know, the whole circuit he did through the, you know, cabaret show. You know, he sort of drifted into rock and roll, but it was always going to be there, you know, it was genetics. He's got a lot to answer for, you know.
Do you worry in that way? Because, as you say, you talk about your obsessive-compulsive nature. Do you worry about
Absolutely, I worry about it with all my
reason?
children. You know, when I got myself straightened out, I actually put myself into a clinic in America because I just figured I'd get, you know, I had a way of wangling people around my fingers in Australia, and I'd get away with murder here. So I went to America and put myself in a clinic for a month. And part of the process of doing that was I took the kids over, and they did family treatment with me, because it's a problem. Not only the genetic side of you know, they're going to be predisposed to addiction and predisposed to alcoholism, but also, you know, over the years where you think you've been sort of harmless, you know, like you're still looking after your children, you've scarred them as well, you know. So there was stuff there that we had to deal with, you know. They were angry about me sort of trying to kill myself, basically. It's the longest, slowest suicide they've ever seen, you know.
When you went to this clinic in America, what sort of stuff did... Because they have to work on you first, don't they, before they work on
absolutely.
the family?
I was there, and it was the full-on, you know, 12-step program thing. It was like, you know, it was a huge clinic in Arizona, and for the first few days was sort of just basically cleaning yourself up. I mean, getting straight and detoxing is the simplest part of addiction. You know, you can lie around. If you got it, you know, I'm fairly tough. I can lie around. You know, you can scream and shake and, you know, and yell and say you want things, and you're not going to get them, and get over that pretty quickly. That's a couple of days, but actually sort of dealing with the things that drive you to you know, drink 2 bottles of vodka a day. You know, drive you to take, you know, so much cocaine you got to, you know, finance the sort of Bolivian revolution. You know, the things that drive you to do that, they're the things that you've got to really look at, and that takes time, and that's stuff that I still look at now. You know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of that stuff just comes from my upbringing. You know, I think that we sort of nailed it down a bit. I've got sort of abandonment issues, you know, which I think is the most common thing that most people get. But you know, I've always been the sort of person, I don't like to sort of, it's not my family's fault, you know. So there's other people that come through that who don't get the same as me. I allowed myself to run out of control. So, you know, it's a lot of it's about self-control. I figured that I've been sort of, you know, I've been running away from myself as long as I can remember. You know, I mean, and once again, part of that is what made me who I am as far as an entertainer and as far as, you know, as a person. I remember from being 4 or 5 years old, trying to make people like me. You know, I'm 5 years old at school, I'd be up singing, and they'd send me around all the classes singing. You know, I'd always be top of the class. I was captain of the soccer team. I was like always working to make people like me, and I'd do anything to make people like me. And so when I got on stage, you know, if you know, people wanted me to be a bloody, you know, lunatic, absolutely, I can do that, you know. And I did it better than most. And so what the problem that you know, the things that really nearly killed me were also my biggest assets. So that's the balance that you've got to get. Nowadays, I can be a lunatic without anything. So. And you know, one of the things that was a worry, was a big worry, was when I left Arizona, came back here, suddenly I've got to go on stage. And I must have done about 3 shows in my life sober and straight. You know, and even I did shows in B division at Pentridge, and I still smuggled alcohol and drugs in. You know, I mean, it was like, you know, I'd never done it, and for me, it was a big challenge. You know, like I'm not actually when I did it, I just wondered to myself when on the way back, I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to do this? You know, what do I do now? But I got up and I started singing, and once I started singing, it was cool. You know, it was all right, and I realized that at that point, for a start, that my voice had, you know, we can't tell from this, but my voice had improved, like, you know, 100%. I was singing, my sound guy came back, he'd been working for me for 14 years and said, you know, you just sang about, you know, twice as loud as you've ever sang since I've known you. You know, I had more control. And I finished the set and I came off and I was like, right, let's do another one. You know, I'm ready. Like, let's go again.
Was it as good to do it that way?
It was strange, and it took me about 2 or 3 shows to sort of like to just get this settle in. And now I just can't imagine. I realize now that I was like sort of nobbling myself every night, you know, as to the max. I don't know how the hell I did some of the shows, you know.
But it's really impressive that you've grasped the medal here. We've kind of been laughing about it, EJ, but this family therapy thing, it's a big thing for your father to sort of strip himself down like that in front of his kids. What do you think of him?
I'm very proud of him, and just amazing that he can, and you know, we can all drink in front of him and stuff and it doesn't matter. And so you're a fast learner, I think. And you have some pretty good character traits as well.
Thanks, your pocket money just went up.
I want to talk one last bit of the journey. This album you brought out, Duets, you did one with your brother, Swanee. And after doing that, you went to visit your dad, Jim.
Yeah, John did, yeah.
You went with him, is that right?
No, John went down, yeah.
Right.
Because I was in the studio that afternoon. Yeah, my dad's very sick, and he, you know, my dad, like I said, he was a boxer, but he was also smoked cigarettes since he was 5 years old. I mean, when you're in Scotland, it was sort of like his parents who said, oh, they didn't know that, you know, you're going to die of cancer or whatever from these things. Yeah, take these, it'll keep you calm. So my dad refused to go to school, you know, when he was 5, 6 years old, unless he had 5 woodbines in his bag, you know. So, you know, I don't know where I got my traits from. You know, and he smoked for 60 years, and he's got very bad emphysema. And you know, we don't know if he's, you know, got a long time to go, but he is. He's you know, he's got the same sort of constitution as us, you know. So he's a real fighter.
Are you close to him?
Yeah. And my family is one of those families where when we're really close, but we don't have to be around each other. You know, we really don't. You know, I love them all dearly, and I adore them. But sometimes if we're too close physically, it becomes a problem. You know.
How do you hope to be singing when you're 75?
I should be really, really good by then. You know, I've got a unique instrument. You wouldn't know from now because, like, literally, I've got the worst flu. But it's very, very rare I lose my voice. I remember a couple of years back, I was doing some TV show like Hey, It's Saturday, and had some vocal teacher out from America, this famous vocal teacher who taught all sorts of people. And she came in, and I was warming up. My warm-up is sort of peels the paint off walls. You know, and I was warming up, and she burst into my dressing room and said, that's how a rock and roll singer should warm up, you know? That's what you're gonna do, that's how you have... and I've had these, and so, you know, like, I thought, oh, maybe I'm doing the right thing after all. I'd lost my voice one time, long time ago with the flu, and it was a big show I had to cancel, so we had to go for insurance. And they put an optical fiber camera down the back of my nose and had me singing and talking. And they said to me, that when I sing, I don't use my vocal cords. You have your 2 main vocal cords like this, and then around them you have these false cords. And apparently, when I sing, this guy said I was one of like about half a dozen people he's ever seen in the world who've taught themselves to sing like this. And so I get to the point where I can't speak because I use my vocal cords to speak, but I can still sing. You know, I just don't lose my voice. It's like my voice is like a Mack truck. It's hard to start and then you can't stop it.
You must have throat specialists out there just weeping. They're just thinking, bring Jimmy to me.
Yeah, I went to one not so long back, you know, for a checkup, and it was like they just laughed. You know?
Yeah.
We don't believe you, you know. It's the same, you know, since I've got, you know, well and healthy and all that, I go to the doctors and for physicals and stuff, and they just laugh. They say, these can't be your results, you know. I know what you do to yourself, you know. I've seen you, you know. And I'm just healthy as a bull.
Stay well, stay healthy.
Absolutely.
Jimmy Barnes, thank you.